On Monday morning at approximately 9 a.m. Gulf Standard Time, an Iranian cruise missile left its launcher on the Iranian coast and tracked toward a United States Navy-guided missile destroyer operating in the Strait of Hormuz. It was shot down. Another cruise missile followed. It was shot down. Iranian drones entered the airspace above the shipping lanes. They were intercepted, and then the small boats came, 7 of them, fast attack craft, the IRGC's most capable asymmetric naval weapon. The boats that survived 67 days of bombing because they are too small and too fast to track reliably from altitude, accelerating across the water toward the 2 American-flagged commercial vessels that Project Freedom had spent its first hours guiding toward the exit of the Persian Gulf. U.S. Navy helicopters met them. The helicopters blew them up. 7 small Iranian boats burning in the same 21-mile waterway where Trump had declared his humanitarian mission to free trapped seafarers 14 hours earlier. Admiral Brad Cooper, the commander of U.S. Central Command, got on a conference call with reporters Monday afternoon and confirmed the sequence of events in official language that strips the drama from it, but cannot strip the meaning. He said Iran had launched multiple cruise missiles, drones, and small boats at U.S. Navy ships and at commercial ships being protected by the U.S. military. He said the U.S. used a combined force of destroyers, helicopters, fighter jets, drones, and other assets to protect the movement of the 2 ships through the strait. He said the U.S. military blew up 6 small Iranian boats. Trump said 7 on Truth Social. Both numbers represent the same military exchange. The first direct combat between U.S. and Iranian forces since the ceasefire took effect on April 8th. The ceasefire that Trump told Congress had terminated all hostilities as of April 7th produced its first exchange of fire on May 4th, 27 days after Trump declared it indefinitely extended. The ceasefire is not fraying. The ceasefire is not on shaky ground. The ceasefire is over in every military sense of the word, except the one that both governments are refusing to use. The specific refusal to name what happened is the most diplomatically significant element of Monday's exchange. Admiral Cooper, when asked directly by reporters whether the ceasefire was now over following the exchange of fire, said, "I wouldn't go into details of whether the ceasefire is over or not." The commander of U.S. Central Command, the officer responsible for every American military operation in the Middle East, the man who confirmed that Iran launched multiple cruise missiles at U.S. Navy destroyers, the man who confirmed U.S. helicopters sank Iranian boats, declined to state whether a ceasefire exists. He said the key thing is that U.S. forces are there as a defensive force, giving a very thick layer of defense to commercial shipping. He said Iran was initiating aggressive behavior. He did not say the ceasefire is over. Iran's position mirrors the American position precisely in its refusal to name reality. Iranian state broadcaster IRIB denied that any Iranian boats had been sunk. Iran's semi-official Fars news agency, the IRGC-affiliated outlet, said 2 missiles had struck an American warship. CENTCOM denied this. Iran's foreign ministry did not issue a ceasefire termination declaration. Both sides fired weapons at each other in the Strait of Hormuz, and both sides are declining to acknowledge that this constitutes a resumption of hostilities under the ceasefire framework that both sides signed through Pakistani mediation on April 8th. The diplomatic architecture of an indefinite ceasefire extension is being maintained as a legal fiction while cruise missiles and attack helicopters conduct real operations in the same waterway. This is not hypocrisy. It is the specific calculation that both governments have made simultaneously. Naming the ceasefire dead removes the diplomatic space that the 14-point proposal, the back-channel very positive discussions, and the Friday, May 8th ceasefire reassessment date all require to continue functioning. Neither side can afford to name the ceasefire dead while Iran is still reviewing America's response to the 14-point proposal. And Trump is still saying Iranian negotiators are being far more malleable than they have been in the past. The Trump phone interview with Fox News reporter Trey Yingst that accompanied Monday's military exchange contained 3 statements that exist in such extreme contradiction with each other that understanding all 3 simultaneously is required to understand where this war actually is. Statement 1, if Iran targets U.S. ships in the Strait of Hormuz during Project Freedom, they will be blown off the face of the earth. Statement 2, the Iranian negotiators are being far more malleable than they have been in the past, showing flexibility in indirect negotiations. Statement 3, Iran had taken some shots at other countries, and he encouraged South Korea to come and join the mission, blown off the face of the earth. far more malleable. Come join the mission. These three statements were delivered by the same person in the same phone call about the same conflict in the same waterway on the same Monday. The blown off the face of the earth statement is the military threat calibrated to deter continued Iranian aggression against Project Freedom. The far more malleable statement is the diplomatic signal calibrated to keep the 14-point proposal process alive and preserve the negotiating channel that Pakistan and Russia have been maintaining. The come, join the mission statement is the rhetorical performance for Trump's domestic audience that converts a military exchange with Iran into an invitation for allied nations to participate in a humanitarian operation. All three are true simultaneously, because this war, at 67 days, is simultaneously a military confrontation, a diplomatic negotiation, and a domestic political performance that Trump is managing in real time through a phone call with a Fox News reporter while Iranian missiles are being shot down and Iranian boats are being sunk in the world's most important energy corridor. The two U.S.-flagged commercial vessels that successfully transited the Strait of Hormuz on Monday are the operational measure of Project Freedom's Day 1 result. Two ships. Against the pre-war flow of 120 vessels per day, two ships represents a 1.7% restoration of Hormuz's pre-war traffic capacity. Retired U.S. Army Lieutenant General Karen Gibson, speaking on CNN's Anderson Cooper 360, called the first day a tactical success, but said it must be measured against the pre-war flow of 120 vessels a day. She said Iran just needs to continue to present a perception of risk to keep merchant traffic to small numbers, essentially keeping Hormuz all but closed. Commercial confidence is really the center of gravity, Gibson said. The shipping industry confirmed her assessment before Day 1 was complete. BIMCO, the world's largest international shipping association with more than 2,000 member companies, issued a statement through its Chief Safety and Security Officer, Jacob Larson, saying the overall security situation for the shipping industry is currently unchanged. Larson questioned whether Trump's plan was sustainable longer term and said it risked hostilities breaking out again. Maersk confirmed that a vessel belonging to one of its subsidiaries crossed the Strait of Hormuz with U.S. military escort on Monday, making it the first Maersk transit since the shipping giant suspended all Hormuz and Red Sea operations in February. One Maersk vessel, one crossing, against the 120 daily transits that constituted pre-war normal. The gap between the tactical success that CENTCOM is describing and the commercial confidence restoration that Gibson and BIMCO say is the actual measure of success is the gap between what Project Freedom accomplished on its first day and what reopening Hormuz requires. The Fujairah attack is the dimension of Monday's events that the Project Freedom coverage has systematically underreported, despite being its most strategically significant element. The Fujairah oil industry zone is located on the eastern coast of the United Arab Emirates, on the Gulf of Oman side of the Strait of Hormuz, which means it is geographically outside the strait itself. The UAE is not a party to the U.S.-Iran war. The UAE has maintained careful neutrality throughout the conflict, hosting diplomatic channels, maintaining economic relationships with both American and Iranian adjacent parties, and attempting to protect its own energy and financial infrastructure from the consequences of a war fought primarily between larger powers. Iran attacked it anyway. Emirati authorities confirmed that a major fire broke out at the Fujairah oil industry zone after Iranian drones struck the facility. The UAE's air defense forces intercepted additional Iranian missiles targeting Emirati territory. Iranian state media, in a statement that contradicted the physical evidence of the fire, said Iran had no plans to target the UAE. The fire was visible from satellite imagery. The fire was confirmed by Emirati civil defense authorities. Iranian state media's denial of an attack that produced a visible fire in a confirmed oil industrial zone is the same credibility calculation that has characterized every Iranian military communication throughout this war. Deny first, acknowledge selectively later if the evidence is overwhelming. What the Fujairah attack represents strategically is Iran expanding its target set from the strait itself to the allied regional infrastructure that supports American military operations and regional energy supply simultaneously. The Fujairah facility is used as a major bunkering hub where ships take on fuel before or after transiting Hormuz. Attacking it during Project Freedom is Iran demonstrating that the operation's supporting infrastructure is as vulnerable as the ships transiting the operation's corridor. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent's characterization of Iran's remaining naval capability landed differently on Monday than it would have on any other day. Bessent told Fox News that the U.S. has absolute control of the Strait of Hormuz, dismissing Iran's navy as a band of pirates. The specific phrase band of pirates is ironic, given that Trump himself used the word pirates to describe his own Navy's operations just 4 days earlier on the South Lawn of the White House, saying we are sort of like pirates because we are out there taking ships. Now his Treasury Secretary is using the same word to describe the Iranian Navy that used the same word to describe the American blockade months before either Trump or Bessent adopted it. The absolute control claim is the more operationally consequential statement. If the United States has absolute control of the Strait of Hormuz on Monday, May 4th, Iranian cruise missiles are not being fired at U.S. Navy destroyers in the same waterway on the same day. The absolute control claim and the multiple cruise missiles launched claim cannot both be simultaneously accurate. CENTCOM's own framing is more precise. The U.S. has established an enhanced security area using Oman's territorial waters as a routing path and has created what Admiral Cooper described as a one-way path through the strait to allow commercial vessels to exit. A one-way path through a portion of the strait using Oman's territorial waters as a routing corridor is not absolute control of the entire 21-mile waterway. It is a defended corridor that 2 U.S.-flagged vessels used on Monday, while 7 Iranian fast attack boats approached and were destroyed, and cruise missiles were shot down, and a UAE oil facility burned. The South Korean vessel incident adds a third nationality to Monday's maritime casualties alongside the American military exchange and the UAE facility attack. A South Korean-operated Panama-flagged cargo ship was struck by an explosion and fire while at anchor near the UAE in the Strait. South Korea's foreign ministry said there were 24 crew members on board, 6 South Korean nationals and 18 from other countries. No casualties were reported. The vessel was being towed to a nearby port for checks and repairs as of Tuesday morning. Trump, in a Truth Social post that addressed the South Korean vessel's situation, encouraged South Korea to come and join the mission, turning a South Korean ship caught in Iranian fire into a recruitment pitch for Project Freedom Coalition membership. The South Korean foreign minister's response was more measured. Seoul called for free and unimpeded navigation through the Strait of Hormuz in keeping with international law and said South Korea stands ready to support all efforts for a peaceful resolution. This is the diplomatic formulation of a country whose ship just burned in an active conflict zone, declining to join a military operation that its ally invited it to join through social media, while encouraging it the way one might encourage a friend to join a gym. The ceasefire reassessment timeline adds a constitutional layer to everything happening in the Strait. CNN reported that the ceasefire's future will be reassessed on Friday, May 8th, if there is a need to extend the period. May 8th is 3 days from today. The reassessment date was built into the ceasefire extension framework when it was announced. It does not automatically terminate the ceasefire on May 8th. It creates an institutional review moment at which both sides must evaluate whether the conditions that justified the extension still apply. The conditions that justified the April 21st indefinite extension were Iran submitting a unified proposal and discussions being concluded one way or the other. Iran has submitted a 14-point proposal. America has responded to it through Pakistani intermediaries. Discussions are ongoing in the specific sense that neither side has declared them concluded. The May 8th reassessment will determine whether those ongoing discussions are sufficiently substantive to justify continued ceasefire maintenance, or whether Monday's exchange of fire has moved the situation beyond the point where the ceasefire framework provides useful diplomatic cover. CNN's diplomatic editor Nick Robertson reported that the ceasefire's future could hinge on what happens in the Strait of Hormuz on Tuesday, meaning Day 2 of Project Freedom is not just a military operation but a diplomatic event whose outcome determines whether there is still a ceasefire to extend on Friday. Iran's internal communication about Monday's events reveals the dual-track strategy that has operated throughout this conflict, but which Monday's exchange makes clearer than any previous day. The official diplomatic track is represented by Tehran's foreign ministry, confirming that Iran is reviewing the latest U.S. response to the 14-point proposal. Reviewing means the diplomatic process is alive. The military track is represented by the IRGC launching cruise missiles and drones and fast attack boats at U.S. ships. Attacking means the military pressure is active. Both tracks are being operated simultaneously by the same government in the same 24-hour period. The internal Iranian logic connecting them is the one that hardliner faction has been articulating since April 8th. Iran must demonstrate at every moment that it retains the military capability and the will to use it, because any diplomatic concession made without simultaneously demonstrating military capability is perceived domestically and regionally as capitulation rather than negotiation. The cruise missiles and drones fired on Monday are Iran telling its own population, its regional allies, the IRGC rank and file, and the Houthi and Hezbollah networks that it still fights, that the diplomatic conversations are happening from a position of military strength rather than from the position of a country that has been suffocated into submission. The far more malleable that Trump described in the same Fox News call is the diplomatic track responding to that military demonstration with the acknowledgement that Iran is willing to negotiate from that position of demonstrated strength. The gas price number at $4.46 per gallon is 1 cent higher than Monday's $4.45 and reflects the market's immediate assessment of what the Iranian cruise missile attacks on U.S. ships mean for the prospect of a near-term Hormuz reopening. Brent crude above $110 per barrel after the dueling claims of the Iranian and U.S. navies is the market saying that Project Freedom did not open Hormuz in any commercially meaningful sense on its first day, and that the Iranian response of missiles and drones suggests Day 2 and Day 3 and the Friday, May 8th reassessment will not produce the commercial confidence restoration that would allow shipping companies to resume normal transit volumes. The 1.7% restoration of pre-war traffic capacity that 2 ships represents, against the backdrop of 7 Iranian boats sunk and cruise missiles fired and a UAE oil facility burning, is the market's specific calculation translated into a price: $110 per barrel, 1 cent higher than yesterday. Every Iranian cruise missile that failed to hit an American ship on Monday cost Iran nothing in weapons terms compared to the cost it imposes on global oil markets simply by being fired in the world's most important energy corridor. Iran's asymmetric economic warfare is not about sinking American destroyers. It is about maintaining the perception of risk in the strait that keeps commercial vessels away, regardless of what U.S. military force is present. 2 ships got through Monday. 118 ships stayed away. Trump called the ongoing U.S. naval blockade of Iran's ports the greatest military maneuver in history during his Fox News call Monday. The greatest military maneuver in history has spent 67 days producing gas prices of $4.46, the destruction of 60,500 Iranian housing units, over 3,600 Iranian deaths, the displacement of 1 million Lebanese people, the destruction of 159 Iranian naval vessels, 7 sunk on Monday alone, the seizure of the Tuska with Marines from the 31st Marine Expeditionary Unit, the shooting down of Iranian cruise missiles over the Strait of Hormuz, the burning of a UAE oil facility, the stranding of 20,000 seafarers, and a diplomatic 14-point proposal from Iran that Trump cannot imagine would be acceptable. This is where the greatest military maneuver in history stands on its 67th day. 2 American-flagged ships transited the strait. 1 Maersk subsidiary vessel crossed with U.S. escort. 7 Iranian boats were destroyed. Iranian missiles were shot down. The ceasefire that both governments refused to call dead produced its first exchange of fire. And somewhere in the background of the Fox News call, between blown off the face of the earth and far more malleable, a Friday reassessment date is approaching that will tell the world whether the diplomatic track that Iran's 14-point proposal represents still has enough life in it to justify the fiction that a ceasefire exists in a waterway where helicopters are blowing up fast attack boats and cruise missiles are being shot down over commercial shipping lanes. Cooper would not say the ceasefire is over. Iran would not say the ceasefire is over. Trump said the Iranians are more malleable and also said they will be blown off the face of the earth. The Treasury Secretary said the U.S. has absolute control of a strait where cruise missiles were fired. The BIMCO secretary said the security situation is unchanged. 2 ships got through. 7 boats sank. A UAE oil facility burned. Gas is $4.46. Brent is above $110. Friday, May 8th is 3 days away. And the ceasefire that Trump told Congress had terminated all hostilities as of April 7th just produced its first exchange of fire on May 4th. The word for what happened Monday in the Strait of Hormuz is war. Neither government will use it. But the helicopters and the cruise missiles and the sinking boats know what they are part of, regardless of what word is written in the diplomatic communications that both sides are maintaining with simultaneous and meticulous care. Subscribe right now because Day 2 of Project Freedom on Tuesday and the Friday, May 8th. Ceasefire reassessment are the two most consequential events in this war since the April 8th ceasefire that produced the indefinitely extended framework that Monday's exchange of fire has now made impossible to maintain without acknowledging that the ceasefire has functionally ended. And what Trump and Iran decide to call Monday's events in their official communications on Tuesday morning will determine whether the diplomatic 14-point proposal track continues or whether the blown off the face of the earth promise becomes the next phase of the military campaign that the greatest military maneuver in history has not yet concluded. Tell us in the comments, with Iran firing cruise missiles and drones at U.S. Navy ships, the U.S. sinking 7 Iranian fast attack boats, a UAE oil facility burning, and CENTCOM declining to say whether the ceasefire is still active. Do you believe the Friday, May 8th reassessment produces another ceasefire extension that papers over Monday's exchange of fire as self-defense rather than hostility? Or has Project Freedom's Day 1 triggered the resumption of major combat operations that General Kellogg has been calling for since April?